Welcome to this special marathon coverage on NewsX. As Prime Minister Modi is in Canada for the first time in 10 years, we are now counting down to the Prime Minister and his arrival, where he will be welcomed by Mark Carney. Further engagements of the G7 will be without US President Donald Trump, who left the summit midway. He said he had to go and do some big stuff. Although before leaving, Trump expressed regret on Russia not being part of the grouping, which Kremlin has welcomed. Although on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's agenda will be bilaterals with several leaders, including Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, dominating the agenda of G7 engagements will continue to be the Iran and Israel conflict. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, is the latest one to comment, as he has warned Israel against further conflict. All right, let's continue to talk about this. Joining us on the program is Lord Remy Ranger, member of the House of Lords from the United Kingdom. Appreciate you joining us. How do we see the Indian Prime Minister's visit to G7 summit, and why is it important to you?
Well, first of all, India has earned its place in this summit by being a number 4 economy, being the largest population in the world, being the biggest democracy in the world, having connection with Commonwealth countries, SAARC, and above all with the Quad. So therefore, without the participation of India, it will become an insignificant summit, without having any real power behind them. Because India has now emerged as a global power, not only economically, but also as a country which is exporting lots of their engineers, scientists, teachers, IT engineers throughout the world. And India's influence has really become a global influence because Indians are the biggest business people in the West. They are the biggest industrialists. They are also in politics in every country. So therefore, India's participation represents 1.4 billion people who are developing faster than any other economy in the world. So therefore, I think it's very important that India should have been invited, and it symbolizes India's emerging economic power and also global power.
What do you make of Trump's early exit, and what is your outlook on the war in the Middle East at this point in time?
Well, first of all, the behavior of a US president gives alarm to people that the European community has to become strong and the alliance has to become strong. They cannot depend on one country if they are to run their affairs in a pragmatic manner. So therefore, it is very important that the new alliances should emerge, and alliances should reflect the emerging power of those countries. There are countries like Brazil, there are countries like India. They should also be given a proper platform so they too can contribute and too can bring their narrative to this summit. So therefore, I think behavior of President Trump, really should be giving alarm to people because he can blow hot and cold.
All right. Well, can the G7 move beyond statements and do something significant on stopping the Middle East war?
Absolutely, because the Middle East war will not be confined just to Middle East, because Iran has given threat to Israel repeatedly that it will wipe Israel from the face of the world. Therefore, the threat should be taken seriously. It's a radical regime. People are oppressed, and the handful of people are dictating what to do. And above all, there is no actual democracy in Iran where people can choose their leaders and then have a government which represent their aspiration. Religion is very important to all, but religion does not take us to the level where the rest of the world is growing. So therefore, religion should remain as a source for spiritual uplift. not to control people, not to keep women at the disadvantaged position, because by doing that, you really cannot move forward, because women play a very important role in this world, and having uh, the strength of women along the strength of men will complement the growth and the development of a country. So I think Iran has to be taken seriously, and the world has to unite. This war is not just war between Israel and Iran; it's a war between free world and a totalitarian regime, which is not moving with the time. With the time is now, we have to have a rule of law. We have to treat everybody equal. We have to give people a secular and democratic country. You cannot discriminate people on the basis of their race, religion, or gender if you are to progress as a nation. So I think Iran is a threat to the world peace.
All right, sir. Appreciate you joining us. My colleague Megha Sharma is also at the venue of the G7. She's joining us live once again. Megha, of course, apart from the positives that surround this summit for India, there is. I would request the PCR not to leave their audio on. It disrupts the anchor. Megha, apologies for that. Well, the agenda that which India has undertaken is obviously very crucial to us. But global headlines, Megha, global headlines are all talking about Donald Trump's early exit. They are also talking about the fact that the G7 should have been G8, G9, with the inclusion of Russia and China also in the grouping. Do you get a sense, Megha, while you're there, that the sheen that the G7 was supposed to produce has dumbed down a little after Donald Trump's exit, or that's not the case?
Well, I think the G7 leaders, when they came together, I think while we were talking about how the summit is going to be overshadowed by the Iran-Israel conflict and the Ukraine-Russia war, but what Trump was able to do in the 1.5 days that he was present over here since 15th of June, he has been able to talk more about tariffs and trades. He has already struck a deal between United States of America and United Kingdom. A proclamation has been signed between both the leaders yesterday. The second success for the United States when it comes to a trade deal has happened between Canada and US, where 30 days at this point of time have been allotted by the Trump administration to get into the nitty-gritties and come to the negotiating table and find out what exactly best suits for Canada and for United States of America. And hopefully this will happen by the end of the 30-day deadline that has been announced. So I think the G7 has in fact been overshadowed by Trump's agenda, which has been tariffs. In fact, all these countries, the non-G7 nations as well, whether it was South Korea or India or Brazil, they had, if a chance had been given, if Trump had continued to attend on day 3, the concluding day of the G7 summit, they would have most definitely liked to talk about the tariffs and some way of concluding a deal between the United States, something which the Trump administration is really open to, because Trump has been talking about how there are 150 countries and more that have been wanting the US administration to strike a deal, finalize an agreement so that it is beneficial for the respective countries. So yes, and also, the other agenda that the Ukrainian president had, Volodymyr Zelensky, who was in Austria just a day before, and made a statement to the media, said his intent would be to have a few minutes, maybe a bilateral or a pull aside with the US president, and somehow influence him, persuade him to impose additional sanctions on Russia, to freeze assets of Russia, to even put higher price caps on Russian oil. All these 3 points that that United States and President Trump has been distancing himself from, particularly in the hopes that if it strikes a positive chord with the President Putin, there is perhaps a hope a peace deal that could be negotiated by Trump between Russia and Ukraine. And of course, that big statement that came from President Trump yesterday, saying that it was a humongous mistake for the G8 nations to have expelled Russia from the grouping, and it has resonated with the president of Russia, and Kremlin has come out with an official response appreciating President Trump's remark on that particular topic. And yes, absolutely. Since I think 2018 is when this chatter about how Trump was not happy about G7 as a grouping, he found it to be quote unquote futile, of not any relevance any longer. And he was desirous of bringing back Russia into the grouping, not just Russia, but even India and China, which are emerging economies. And therefore again, and a number of issues that had been raised by Mark Carney in the beginning when the group working session started off. He's spoken about, building supply chains for critical minerals, talking about security and peace, talking about transnational crime and foreign interference. Those have been the issues that Mark Carney has been wanting to highlight. But we'll only get to know in the joint statement that is released by the end of the day today of how much emphasis has been given to all these points that Carney was trying to, envisage as the building blocks of the 50th G7 summit here in Canada.
Megha, thank you for that update. We'll keep coming back to you, keep taking updates on what is happening in Alberta at this point in time, in Calgary, minute by minute. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you again. Joining us on the program at this point in time is Ambassador Deepak Vora, former diplomat. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, also joins us on the show. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, with us on the program. Shruti Das Gupta, foreign affairs expert, with us on the show as well. Ambassador Vora, I'll begin with you, sir. Well, like I said, the sheen of the G7 perhaps may be missing because Donald Trump has made an exit, but I wanna in fact talk about the fact that tariffs are still haunting a number of non-G7 members, and they were hoping that they would get out Donald Trump, find some sort of a solution, to end this back and forth, the tariff bickering. But Donald Trump goes poof. What do you make of this grouping, sir? And also, the agenda-defining statement was also put in by Donald Trump when he said that more countries should be a part of the G7. It should be a G8. It should be a G9. But he did not mention India. He mentioned Russia and China as a part of this grouping.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure to be with you. And of course, I see Mr. Mukherjee is there, and I see Dr. Kohli, and I see Ms. Das Gupta, whose collective knowledge is much greater than mine. You mentioned some organization. What did you call it? G what? G7. Oh, yeah, I heard of it. Does it still survive? I'm not quite sure. Totally irrelevant, totally useless. Skipping it would have caused no damage to India's reputation. Attending it hasn't enhanced our profile in any way. But of course, Prime Minister went there because the bilateral meetings is what adds excitement to this. Now, so about Donald Trump leaving, it has nothing to do with the G7. He shoots off his mind. Tomorrow he'll say Bhutan should also become a member of G7. Are you going to take him seriously? Or maybe Somalia should. The man is a narcissist, and you know what that means. But what we did gain was the bilateral. Prime Minister met with this fellow, that fellow, discussed this, that, and the other, didn't talk to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, of course, has gone back saying, I have to rush back because something very big is going to happen in Israel in Iran in the next 24 to 48 hours. And I'll tell you what it is. If you believe it, you don't believe it, it's up to you. But some of my friends who are very tough and retired Iranian generals, Iranian diplomats settled in other countries, brace for this. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is in Moscow. He's no longer in Tehran. He's run away like many other Iranians. Believe it, don't believe it, I don't know what to make of it, but this has come to me on my WhatsApp group, so I'm sharing it with you. He's run away because he feared that Netanyahu would honor his pledge to send this 85-year-old, 90-year-old chap to his wherever these fellows go when they're obliterated. This seems to be the main thing in Trump's mind. And the second thing, what was Israel's aim in hitting Iran? One, of course, was the finish its nuclear program. Much more important was changing the mullah regime. That is what seems to be happening now. So Trump going away, G7 is pretty useless. They'll issue a statement, or they have, no? Israel has the right to defend itself. Who bothers about these characters? Used to be 70% of the world's economic strength once upon a time when it was formed, initially as the library group of 4, then it became 5, then became 6. Then the Canadians said, hi, mujhe bhi le lo. Then it became 7. Then the Russians came in, it became 8. It's back to 7. And it's a bit of a joke, this thing. All the economic power has shifted from the West to the East. Nevertheless, it's there. It's an important grouping. We have to deal with them. So Trump running away from there to deal with bigger issues, it just shows you how much importance he attaches to G7. The sooner it is dissolved. And there's that other racket also based in New York. What's that called, Dr. Kohli? There's 173 members. I think Ms. Dasgupta, when it's called the United something or the other. I believe it's still alive. And it has some
the United Negation.
That's right. Thank you very much. And there's some Guttergoo fellow. Whenever there's a conflict, he claims to be the Secretary General. Whenever there's a conflict anywhere, he's memorized 2 words. Every Secretary General, maximum restraint. Thank you very much. Maximum restraint. What that means, nobody listens to the buffoon, but he goes around saying this. So, sir, to sum up, I'm sorry I was a bit honest and straightforward with you, but that's my trademark in diplomacy. I'm not a good diplomat. What I did want to say is that G7 or no G7, the world will continue to move the way it is moving.
Well said, sir. Well said. And as usual, you've impressed us with your perspective here. Dr. Kohli, well, it's the same treadmill that we keep running on. And it's the same treadmill which, gives you the illusion that you're getting fit. But all that's happening is that you're at the same spot, running towards a destination which does not exist. Can the same anomaly and the same analogy be applied to the G7 as well? Because I think the only country that would make a difference being part of this grouping is India.
Good evening, Vineet. Good evening to my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. I was listening to the very impressive dialogue by Ambassador Vora, and I can't endorse it more than what he said. 1975 was when G7 was formed, and as he rightly said about the UN also. I found a new, expanded version of UN, but I would not like to say it here. I like to keep it to myself. But I think all these outdated organizations, they are losing their relevance sooner than later. 1975, 50 years of G7. And, the most countries which don't seem to be fitting in, even in terms of size, when we talk of the economy size, Italy, Canada, look at these countries where they stand in terms of the GDP, in terms of the size. I mean, it's just been there. And it's been there for a very long time.
Maybe it's just the size of their ego, Dr. Kohli, that gets them together.
Absolutely. This was formed as a Western alliance, They just brought in Japan to give some kind of representation to the East. Otherwise, there was no sense of bringing Japan in as well. And, the fact that India is not there, I mean, for a moment, let's talk of China as well. The fact that China is not even, 280 odd crore people out of the 800 crore plus population of the world are not being represented. It doesn't make sense. Fine. I mean, there are arguments which are given, Vineet, which say that the world GDP, by the way, for the information of people who do not know what is the world GDP at this point of time, we have about $105 trillion. Fine, they may be representing 43% of the world GDP, but, not counting the population, not counting the people representation doesn't make sense. I think President Trump's exit has only vindicated the stand of what Ambassador Vora said, that I think it has lost its relevance. There's no point of having a G7 kind of a summit here. Who's going to listen? Can they stop the war? The billion-dollar question, Vineet, is, can they stop the war? The answer is one big NO. Nobody's going to listen to them. I mean, who's listening to whom these days? The countries just want to do what they want to do. They are being supported by, those silent supporters here and there. I think the world is nice. This is the day of AUKUS, Quad, OPEC plus, BRICS. I think these smaller groups, which are newer in terms of their age, have become more relevant because the problems have become more regional. Those traditional colonial type groups, I would say, they have absolutely no relevance. And I completely endorse Ambassador Vora when he said, from the chief of the UN, that comment comes about maximum restraint. So it becomes the minimum restraint, every time it is uttered. So Yes, I completely agree. I think as far as Prime Minister Modi and India is concerned, as rightly said, I think it's a good opportunity to make your presence felt. And with Canada, we've been having issues with Canada. They're supporting the Khalistani movement and so and so. And I'm sure this is a good opportunity for Prime Minister Modi to go and just be very straightforward in his talk that, okay, we can set this relationship, but get rid of this nonsense from your country. We don't want anti-India rhetoric coming from your country. We don't want separatism movements emanating out of your
Dr.
country. I
Kohli,
think
the
that
Canadian authorities did allow a number of cavalcades and road shows where, there were processions and car rallies taken out that, did demean the Prime Minister's presence in Canada. How is that a reset?
No, I know because see, Prime Minister has to convey this message, and I'm sure he is conveying that message. There are political, we must not forget that these, extremist organizations, Khalistanis, are being given a political picture there, are being given a political frame there. So when there's a political frame, there is a democracy. You do have a right to come on the road. But I think what matters most, Vineet, right now is PM to PM talk. And I think Prime Minister is going to be very, very straightforward that this is a chance to reset. If you can't get rid of this nonsense from your country against India, then definitely there is no question of resetting. I think that's the opportunity. Plus, apart from that, Prime Minister can have one-to-one dialogue with the United Kingdom or with all those G7. Honestly speaking, I used to remember all these countries by heart once upon a time. Now I don't even feel like remembering there's France, there's Germany, there's UK, there's the same old story, Italy, Canada. I mean, what's there to remember in them? Very honestly, being an economist, I'm making a very bold statement, and I would want Ambassador Vora, Gautam, and my lady fellow panelists also to listen to this. If you go into the details of their economy, I mean, I would not call them developed economies these days. The definition of a developed economy does not match, I'm sorry to say that, does not match what these countries exuberate. They've got nothing which is developed right now. Fine, you may be having a certain amount of infrastructure with you. You may be having a colonial past. Having a colonial past does not make you develop. That's a categorical statement that I would like to make. And I think it is just I think it's another foreign visit for the Prime Minister to take India's image forward. He was going to Cyprus anyway. He was honored. He was given his 19th honor, the highest state honor by the 19th country. But having one-to-one dialogues would be there. I think all eyes on Iran is the conflict right now. And I think that has also overshadowed G7 summit for that matter. And if G7 summit does not end up, saying anything or doing anything on this conflict, I would say this would be end of G7 as far as the organization is concerned, Vineet.
Okay, Gautam, your response to what Ambassador Vora also said, and Dr. Kohli also in fact brought in some important points over here, that some of these smaller groupings such as the ASEAN countries, the BRICS, they have in fact contributed more towards the causes that plague our world than G7. Do you think that most of these leaders are perhaps only collecting miles through their respective airlines and not really getting to the bottom of the impediments that trouble our world today?
Yes, bilaterals, as Trump is indulging in, and small groupings. Because as soon as it becomes large, there are subgroups. There are internal conflicts. For example, on Ukraine, we have a friendship with Ukraine and a friendship with Russia, but we plow our own furrow. We will not join with the NATO forces and condemn Russia. So if you sit in G7, you're going to stand the odd man out because you will not agree with them. Russia is cooperating with Iran right now. China is sending arms to Iran right now. So again, you're not going to do very well with Israel and America in that context. So everywhere it is probably a better idea to stick to bilaterals. And one of the things that Prime Minister Modi does very well is bilateral agreements and bilateral meetings. Small groupings, because at least they're manageable and they're more likely to work. But even that is hard because there are some things you agree on and some things you do. So,
Gautam, go on, please.
so that is a problem. G7 is relevant, I feel, insofar as it represents these Western countries and America. But America's the bulk of it. And because America's the bulk of it, Trump makes it very clear, because in all of these multilateral organizations, whether it's NATO, whether it is the G7 and others, UN, everywhere, the banks, World Bank, IMF, Asian ADB, America foots the bill. America calls the shots. China foots the bill number 2, and then China calls the shots. It's not democratic. It's not issue-based. It is dominated by he who pays the piper, plays the tune. So that is the world we live in today. The reason why India is becoming increasingly more important is we are headed towards a $10 trillion economy. The way we will be treated as a $10 trillion economy a few years down the road is very different from how we are treated now. Right now, it's sort of a reluctant what to do. We can't keep India out. Then it'll be courting India in a very blatant way. If it hasn't begun already, it will become very obvious then. Also, the double standard. We talk of democracy. The democratic views of the West are self-serving. They don't see our terrorism as their terrorism. They see their concerns, and we have to deal with us. When we fought with Pakistan recently, all they saw was the
Gautam, you sound like the
possibility.
External Affairs Minister right now, but that's okay because that's true. But,
Well,
but
then
let me
I'm
let me
on the
quickly
right
rope in
track.
Shruti into this conversation as well. Shruti, what is the criteria for India to get into this club? I wouldn't call it a group. I would call it a club. You know, you have to have a certain net worth. You have to have come from a certain lineage to get into this club. That's what clubs are all about. They've always been based on classification of people, and I think these groupings are also nothing but classifications. The fastest growing economy in the world, the 4th largest economy in the world, the tech center of the world, digital payments, India is leading. When it comes to defense forces, we've just concluded Operation Sindoor, which has demonstrated India's might. What does India need to prove to them to be a part of this grouping? This obviously seems to be a club which is based on a criteria which India definitely is not overlooking but is not considering important.
Good evening, Vineet, and all the fellow panelists. And the viewers. I'd like to say that we are humoring the G7 by being there. We are being kind to them by being there, because if we are not there, they have nothing to discuss. They don't have China on the table, whom they have trade with. If they don't have Russia on the table, whom they have conflict with. They don't have Israel or Iran there, whose wars they want to stop. So they need to have something to discuss. So India is humoring them by being there. We don't really care what the inner core club is discussing, because they're just looking who can get the better deal out of India. So there'll be, my interest would be the bilateral meetings that will be happening on the side, where we will be solving the knot that Trudeau had planted between the Canadian and Indian relationships, and we're going to set the record straight there. I do believe we're looking at some uranium-related trade with Canada, and so that's where the clean energy bit comes through. In PM Carney's statement himself, he said that India is, we need to bring in the supply channels, and India is a supply channel. If all the supply, the trade supplies, everything comes through India. So if we add up whatever PM's 5-day tour is about, He stopped at Cyprus, he's now in Canada, and he's now going to go back to Croatia. So basically, he's strengthening the IMEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor. He's going to strengthen that so that Europe needs him. So whenever Europe, gives a cry call that I need to trade better, I need to trade good, and to present an alternative to the Chinese BRI. So we're doing what we need to do to head towards the $10 trillion economy Gautam spoke about. And these are the steps that we need to do. So we are humoring them. Now, on the other side, if we look at it, the people that refuse. So Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia, refused to come to the table, basically because he knew that they were going to condemn Iran and they're going to support Israel. So that on its face, he has to refuse to not side with a Muslim nation, an Arab nation, and blatant support for Israel in such a manner that the G7 has come out with. So that's why he refused. Now, Indonesia refused to come to this, and the chatter on the ground is that they are thinking that it's a very pro-Russian tilt by not coming to the table. So if refusing the invite would have put us in one of those unwanted blocks that they would like to use and exploit, and then get better deals out of. So being there is we are humoring them, we are being part of their games, while not really indulging them by bending the knee at any of the trading tables. So basically we have played it smart, we'll meet them, we'll get what we need out of them. So that's my take on it.
All right. Well, we have some breaking news coming in. The Israeli Defense Forces have said that Iran launched several missiles towards Israel as air raid sirens briefly sounded across the country. In a brief statement on X, IDF said Iran is attacking again. In a follow-up message, the military said several missiles had been fired from Iran in the past hour and that most of them were intercepted. Of course, the G7 taking place with this kind of a background. Let me rope in Ambassador Vora once again into this conversation. Ambassador Vora, do you think this is also, a lopsided approach of the G7 to, have a predisposition that a war is taking place in which Israel has attacked Iran for independently and sovereignly trying to develop nuclear technology, and the G7 has called on to, in fact, name Iran as a major instability factor in the world. Why don't they have similar feelings towards Pakistan, sir?
Have you heard of a term called hypocrisy? I believe it exists in the English dictionary. Oh, by the way, just before joining this discussion, I had, since we were going to talk about G7, I went to look for a book on G7 in the library. So the librarian said, sir, look in the history section, you might find something there. I couldn't, neither in the history section nor in the fiction section. Nevertheless, of course,
fiction more likely, sir.
Sorry?
Fiction more likely.
All right. So they expose themselves all the time, a bunch of useless, doddering old fellows discussing all kinds of non-issues. They were supposed to discuss world economic issues, then human rights came in, then security came in, which they know nothing about, and now they talk about artificial intelligence and all this kind. This is the thing that they are supposed to be doing. No, what you have said is right. We know who's attacked whom, but the intention was not simply elimination of Iran's nuclear program, it was regime change. They don't like the mullahs, period. Get rid of the mullahs. That's the long-term goal. And that's going to happen in the next 48 hours, which is why Uncle McDonald, whatever his name is, Donald Trump, has run back and said something very big is going to happen over there. It isn't an issue. So watch for the next 48 hours. Let's see what the results are. But I rather suspect that we'll get pulled out on. This reminds me, I think Mr. Mukherjee would know, 1953, there used to be a character called Mohammad Mossadegh, the great Prime Minister of Iran, democratically elected, booted out. Why? Because the Anglo-Iranian oil company, which controlled the oil production in Iran, said, we are doing what we have to. He said, may I audit your accounts? They said, over our dead bodies will you touch our accounts? And then he nationalized them, and then they rationalized him and had him booted out. And what were the three things that they used? So very interesting, the tactics. The first was they bribed all his military and intelligence officers and eliminated some guys. Second, they bribed all the politicians, got them on their side. And third, they got their jihadis or whatever, the naughty fellows out on the streets demonstrating. Precisely that we are seeing happening today. Israel has eliminated all these military fellows through shared intelligence. Otherwise, it's not so easy. They're sitting in a room, Dr. Kohli and I, we're having dinner together on the table. they fire a missile, it gets me, it doesn't touch Dr. Kohli. We're sitting on the same table. So targeted assassination, we are seeing that. We are seeing people about to come onto the streets to scream and yell. And of course, the politicians are running away. There's this huge traffic jam. My Iranian friend told me, huge traffic jam, people trying to get out of Tehran because a certain McDonald Trump has said, get the hell out of Tehran if you want to survive. So let's see what happens in the next 48 hours. But sir, it's a joke, and I'm glad the Prime Minister went there. It was his call. But the main purpose of his visit, of course, was, as you know, Cyprus, with whom we have a certain relationship, and then Croatia. We haven't ever, no Prime Minister has ever been there. So at least there he's setting some kind of record in going there. G7, good stop on the way. Nice food. He doesn't drink, so maybe some other soft drinks, maple syrup from Canada, whatever. Good fun, good fun. Enjoy yourselves. And we are having a discussion. Thank you very much.
Well said, sir. Let me also welcome Michael Kugelman, American foreign policy author, into this conversation as well. Michael, appreciate you being here. Well, you know, before I get to my question, we are getting some breaking news coming in, Michael, that amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, President Trump has taken to social media and stated, and I quote, "We have now complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA." Pretty much synopsizing the sentiment that Donald Trump has when it comes to the war between Israel and Iran. But Michael, we are discussing whatever is happening around the world, with the G7 happening in the background as well. Donald Trump has taken an early exit. He's taken the high road because he feels that if Russia and China are not a part of this grouping, it doesn't really make sense because they perhaps may not be focusing on the big stuff. Michael, what is this big stuff? Can you let us know that Donald Trump is perhaps focusing on?
To be honest, first of all, thanks for having me. To be honest, I don't know. Do any of us know what he means in this context? I think it's notable that when he left the G7 early, he said that he left not to focus on a ceasefire, but something bigger. So I think that he has in his mind the idea of some type of grand bargain. He wants to be the one that tries to mediate some type of deal between Iran and Israel. I don't think that he ever wanted Israel to launch strikes on Iran, but given the very special relationship between the U.S. and Israel, he of course and his administration would have to support what Israel is doing. But I think he's holding out hope that there could still be some type of big deal. And his recent messaging, including what you said just before, as well as this very interesting statement that the White House put out a bit earlier this morning that essentially listed 30 or 40 different times in the past with hyperlinks when President Trump has insisted that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I think all of this might be meant to put pressure on Iran and try to pressure Iran into agreeing to stop fighting and agree to talks. But it's unclear to me that Israel would have any interest in any type of negotiation. So I think the president's in a bit of a tough spot, quite frankly. And, I'll say this, one of his biggest concerns and one of his biggest fears is that the U.S. would be in a position where it risks getting dragged into a conflict. President Trump does not want America fighting wars. It does not want the U.S. to get involved in others' wars. And I think that the biggest concern he had specifically focused on some type of contingency elsewhere, particularly the scenario of China invading Taiwan and the U.S. having to face questions as to how it responds to that. But in this case, it's obviously very different. So he likely does not want to be in this position, but he has, and he's going to have to do something. And indeed, there are some reasons to believe that this war could intensify and escalate. And Israel clearly would like the U.S. to contribute militarily. And I don't think that the president wants to do that, but he is going to continue to face that pressure. So we'll see how it plays out. The stakes are incredible given the stability risks and everything that's playing out here for the broader region.
Dr. Kohli, your thoughts on India's intentions at the G7. My conjecture, or rather my confidence, compels me to say that the Prime Minister understands the sensitivities between India and Canada. He understands that there is a huge diaspora in Canada, which depends on the Indo-Canadian relationship being smooth and soft. And that is the reason Despite these challenges with the G7, despite their intentions, the Prime Minister decided to go there.
Oh yes, we've seen the problems, emanating out of that. The visas were rejected. The investments from Canada had stopped coming. Indians who wanted to set up their businesses in Canada, they had stopped doing. The migrations had been curtailed, and there were so many issues. I mean, a part of Canada is very much India. In fact, there's a place in Ontario called Brampton, which is almost like Punjab. You have most of the people who are Punjabis there. So there is a big diaspora there. And you see, independently, Prime Minister would not have probably visited Canada, but because this was a summit, this was a G7 summit, and he was formally invited. So he had a good reason to go. And I think as I said, he wanted to use this as an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation. And I have a very strong feeling that the conversation is going to be very, very straightforward. Although, Prime Minister Carney is new, but then he's spoken about resetting it. And I think what resetting means here is that just stop all this nonsense happening in Canada. It's as simple as that. This has to stop, whether by force or by dialogue or whatever. It's the duty of the Prime Minister, duty of the government on board to make sure that all this happening within its soil must stop immediately. And I think no country in the world today, Vineet, can afford to ignore India for that matter. India with 140, 45 people, fourth largest economy, on its way to become the third largest, becoming significant part of the global supply chain. And, growing at about 6.5% to 7%. The world is growing at about 2.5%. We are growing 3 times more than the rest of the world. So how can you ignore such a country, for that matter? So I think I agree with Shruti, that they should feel obliged that Prime Minister is visiting them, Prime Minister Modi is visiting them and honoring. Otherwise, what else? I would have been happier if G7 was able to solve the climate problem. I would have been happier if G7 would have been able to solve the massive debt which the G7 countries have amassed on themselves. So only the American debt is about $36 trillion. Every 18 months, they add $1 trillion to their debt. I would have been happier if they would have solved the problem of the supply chain. I would have been happier if they would have been able to solve the problem of United Nations, the funding, and so on and so forth. I mean, what else are you going to sit and talk there except for Iran? And that too with President Trump walking out. What else is there to discuss? So I think I have no doubt that Prime Minister Modi will use this opportunity at the fullest for a one-on-one dialogue, because I really don't see anything significant coming out of G7 declaration, the joint declaration or whatever they want to make. Nothing much is going to come out of that. So one-on-one dialogue will be on top of the table, and that is what the best use of time with Prime Minister Modi would like to make use of, Vineet.
Well said, Dr. Kohli. Breaking news coming in. The Israeli army has released footage showing an F-15 Eagle fighter jet taking off to strike targets in Iran. The video comes as the conflict between the two nations entered its 5th day. Another video also released on the same day shows a missile intercepting an Iranian launched unmanned aerial vehicle aimed at Israel. Remember, Israel began its air campaign with a surprise assault that reportedly killed nearly the entire top echelon of Iran's military commanders and leading nuclear scientists. Let me rope in Gautam Mukherjee also in this conversation. And in Gautam, it's a known fact that the G7 grouping has been inviting India since 2019, and the Prime Minister has always obliged. Once again, we're going to try and understand that there is a new leadership in Canada. There is a new sentiment. So far, Gautam, I'm choosing my words very carefully. They have not done or said anything that has disappointed India. Do you think this is a good sign? And that is perhaps, that one caveat that the Prime Minister decided to ride on and went to Canada?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Carney is going to make every effort to do 2 things. One is to improve the trade relationship with India. Canada is in need of boosting trade. He's going to try and repair the damage done to the number of Indian students that Megha was referring to, that have now encountered various difficulties in going to Canada or finding a job afterwards. He's going to fix these things. And I think he's going to constantly, not in a hurry, he's a banker, but he's going to steadily push away from the Khalistani movement and the grip it seems to have in certain quarters in Canada by undercutting their roots, which is to do with underworld activity, drug running, smuggling, and such like, to finance their activities in cahoots with ISI and China. So he's going to cut away at it, but without, once he does that, and he's going to put various of the, the actual criminal element in jail. So this will go on as an institutional, activity. There will be no more political backing or political scoring via the Khalistanis. And I think Mr. Modi is going to be satisfied with that, given that there's already an intelligence sharing agreement. A few extraditions will cement it and increase the credibility and the trust. So I think it's going to go rather well with Canada from now on.
All right, Shruti, do you share this positive sentiment with the Gautam that it's going to go all well with Canada at this point in time, or do you think it's only a matter of time before internal political factors and party associations and obligations, take us back to an era which every Indian and perhaps every sensible Canadian would like to forget?
Vineet, I think the internal politics of Canada is a little too screwed up right now, for the lack of a better word. The NDP, although reduced in numbers, supported the Liberals in their recent bill that they were trying to pass, and the Conservatives were against. So they stabbed the Conservatives in the back and the people that voted for NDP in the back, and they let the Liberals bill supported the Liberals' point of view on that bill. So in return, the Liberals are going to have to do something for the NDP, and that basically means for the Khalistani elements. So if I look at the Khalistani conversation, a few weeks ago, the Khalistanis had started raising slogans, Hindus go back. And when the diaspora was there to welcome PM Modi today, in Canada, there they had raised this issue that we've been told to go back. A large part, 4.4% of it is Indians, and only about very small, a third of this is only 6%, and Khalistanis are even lesser. So the amount of Hindus and Indians that are there supporting Modi are large but quiet, and they are facing the flag of these Khalistanis. So I guess this is also an element that would be discussed there, that is going to be put out, that my people, my NRIs, my diaspora is under threat due to your relations with NDP, and you need to kind of fix that. But how far will it succeed? I'm not really sure, because right after the invitation that had gone out and been accepted, there were allegations going back and forth. And if I'm not wrong, 2 days ago, the NDP leaders had come out and said that Jagmeet Singh was under direct they'd put out a hit piece, propaganda piece, with credible allegations and credible sources and all those wonderful words that they like to use. That Jagmeet Singh was under some person related to the Embassy of India was surveying movements of Jagmeet Singh, and a Canadian citizen was put under surveillance, and now they've made a huge hoopla out of it. It has been killed, it has been dampened down, but for how long? That means it's going to continue like this unless they are able to defang it completely and tell them, please, this kind of a right protest is one thing, but to say kill Modi and then just politically add politics after it, while you paint a target on Modi's face in Canada, should not be something that a Canadian Liberal Party or even the Conservatives should be encouraging. But they find themselves at loss to be able to do this. The gangs have a really hard stranglehold on the politics of Canada, and I'm not sure how far they will be successful.
Absolutely. Ambassador Vora, where do you stand on this? The Indo-Canadian relationship and the sensitivities that have been associated with it for so long. It's been a headache for India trying to deal with Canada. The previous Prime Minister, I don't know where he left his brains, but not only India, but perhaps majority of the developed world, the mature world, is thankful that Justin Trudeau is no longer at the helm of affairs. But the damage he's done to the relationship between these two countries is not going to get over so easy. Do you think that India does now share that intention of resetting this convoluted relationship?
Canada is a large country with a small mindset. Nobody really cares about it. He'd like to play a crucial role in international affairs. He thinks he does. Nobody really bothers about Canada. Let me also put it across to you like this, that Justin Trudeau, at least he was an equal opportunity offender. He was caught on camera mocking Donald Trump at some function or the other in Buckingham Palace, whatever it was. And he's done this to everybody. I mean, he thinks he's being smart. He's an idiot. What really I see now happening is that it'll take a long time for a relationship to come back to the level that it used to be earlier. Canada has very little to offer India. They have no technology worth the name. Well, their investment, their pension funds had invested in India, not because they love our chole bhature, but because they get a terrific rate of return on their, Dr. Kohli will tell you, in India, much more than they get anywhere else. So that money will come. Money always chases money. Money likes to go where it feels safe and where it can grow. And India is a shining example of that. I don't see any substantial improvement in our relationship. Remember, as was pointed out rightly, that this was not a bilateral visit, but G7. Nevertheless, we didn't send our High Commissioner back, even though the two were good. Normally, the High Commissioner would have been at the airport to receive the Prime Minister and say all those lovely things and do namaskar and present flowers. Nothing of that sort happened this time. There were other people who were there who received him and so on. So my own feeling, sir, is that the damage that this buffoon did in 2 or 3 years is going to take a long time to heal. And we have very cleverly exported our Khalistan problem to Canada. They will have to deal with it. The rule of law says that outlaw Dustbin Trudeau. So you'll see what happens now.
Well said, sir. Some breaking news coming in. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced $1.47 billion military support, including drones and helicopters for Ukraine, as he hosted President Vladimir Zelensky at the G7 summit. Carney, of course, said that this as he met Vladimir Zelensky. Ambassador Vora, how do you see this move? Zelensky getting funding from Canada. $1 billion is a lot of money. This is obviously a worrying sign that the Western world wants this war to go on, and Donald Trump does not. I guess that's why he left.
I think he is, I'm not very clear whether he is in a position to oppose his military-industrial complex, the American president. He'd like to give them money. I think 90% of the rubbish that they produce, or 80% or 70%, some figure I saw somewhere, now is destined for Ukraine. That's the only way that it's able to keep fighting. People getting killed, Ukrainians getting killed, oh, that's collateral damage. You can't talk about that. It's the weapons have to be used. And if people get killed in the process, well, so be it. That's what people are created for. Those idiot Ukrainians are dying every day on the battlefield. And that buffoon thinks he's the world's greatest general, the greatest ideologue, the greatest thinker that the world has ever produced, simply because he was lionized by the West. So this, I don't know. Earlier also, this fellow was invited to the House of Commons, I believe, in Canada. And they had honored some Ukrainian chap there. You remember that happened with Dustbin Trudeau. They honored a chap, 90-year-old fellow, and said, wow, what a great Ukrainian. Turns out he was a Nazi war criminal. They're a bunch of jokers, these characters. So anyway, what I see happening over there is that the money will go, the weapons will take their time in coming, but the war in Ukraine is unlikely to end in the near future unless Shri Putin and Shri Trump sign a deal. Tiger, take Ukraine, take whatever part of Ukraine you want, leave Iran to me, I'll deal with Iran, you deal with Ukraine, and let's just kiss and make up. Sweetheart, sweetheart, darling, darling, we are great buddies, we are great friends, game over. I see that happening in the next few months, before the end of this year in any case.
All right, more breaking news coming in. Well said, Ambassador Vora. European Union President von der Leyen said that the EU and the US have agreed on July 9th as the deadline to finalize trade talks between the two. Speaking at the G7 summit, Mr. Leyen said that they are working towards a trade deal and are making significant progress as well. We're also learning Iran's ambassador to the UK has insisted his country had no intention of building a nuclear weapon as he clashed with MPs in UK's Foreign Affairs Committee. Syed Ali Moswi said that Iran's nuclear program was only peaceful. He insisted that there is no desire, not any intention to introduce or produce a nuclear bomb. Michael, where do you stand on this conflict as such as well? You know, Israel attacking Iran for sovereignly creating a nuclear technology, and using this as a plank to attack a number of Iranian cities. Where do you stand on this, Michael?
I generally think that war is rarely a solution. Sorry for the cliche, but given the sensitivities in the region right now, and given that everything Israel has on its plate, it's clearly it's a major gamble for sure. And I do think that the Israeli government might have been banking on on being able to count on the Americans for military support. And indeed, as we discussed before, it's a very difficult decision for the Trump administration. I do not think that the president would want to be playing that role of a military partner to Israel in this war. So, Israel's made quite clear for many years that it feels very concerned about potential future nuclear weapons threats emanating from Iran. That's its view. That's how it's expressed it. But whether that justifies what I think one could describe as a preemptive war to try to address that threat, that certainly is something to be discussed. This has now become, arguably the biggest crisis globally in a world that had already been on fire for many months before this latest war broke out, and I think it certainly has cast a shadow over the G7 summit for sure. I mean, I think that they wanted to talk about Ukraine, and I'm sure that they definitely have talked about Ukraine. It's going to be impossible to avoid discussing this issue. So it's just a really unfortunate situation to be in right now. And again, as I said before, I do think that the president is hoping that his tactics and his messaging can pressure the Iranians into agreeing to some type of talks. But where Israel would stand in that is of course a different matter.
All right, fair enough. Well, would like to thank all my guests for being a part of this conversation at this time of the day as well, or the night, if I should say. We're going to dip into a short break. Be right back.